Josh Haston here, Israel Uncensored, on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. It is Monday, April the 1st, 2019, the 25th of Adar Bet, 5779. Hope you're doing well in your part of the world. Coming to you from a rainy Israel. It's pretty rare that it rains this late into the year, but it is a true blessing to see the waterfalls in the north of the country, the Kinneret, the Lake of Galilee rising. It's a wonderful thing to see. Hope everything is good with you. Get in touch with me, as always, during the week. Josh at thelandofisrael.com on Facebook. It is Joshua Haston, or my new page, Josh Haston, Israel Advocacy and Journalism, on Twitter at Josh Haston, and now on Instagram as well. We are going to be speaking to Maurice Hirsch in a few minutes. He's the head of legal strategies for Palestinian Media Watch, and an article that he wrote just the other day called "It's Time to Kill Terrorists." That's the title of the article that he wrote. Very important piece, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes after we talk about what is going on here in the news. And Gaza, of course, the top story still in Israel. We do have elections coming up in about 8 days, but Gaza, over the weekend, 3 Palestinians, so-called Arabs living in Gaza, this reported by the Jerusalem Post, were killed. More than 200 were wounded in clashes along Gaza's security fence with Israel, as thousands rioted to mark Land Day and the first anniversary of the weekly so-called March of Return protests. So that happened this Friday, and the various IDF sources were saying that it was handled professionally. It was a smaller demonstration than expected, even though it was 40,000. I mean, the Hamas said they were going to bring 1 million people to the border. That didn't happen. So that all went down. We've had several rockets since then fired at Israel, even though there is this talk of a ceasefire, of a long-term ceasefire, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes. But just here out of the Jerusalem Post, IDF spokesperson Brigadier General Ronen Manalis said that the situation is fragile. He added, quote, "It all depends on how the nights will look. We will not accept that civilians living in the Gaza vicinity will not be able to sleep at night." That in reference to Israelis living in southern Israel. That being said, that tough talk, we've heard that quote so many times, that civilians living in the Gaza vicinity should be able to sleep at night, yet they're not, because the rockets are still falling. So that is why I am not quite sure what the situation is in terms of the so-called ceasefire, why we're going for a ceasefire. Hamas has never lived up to their end of the bargain. Why are we negotiating with Hamas, even if it's via Egypt or through Egypt? I don't understand. It's been 18 years. You now have a second generation of children living near Gaza, Israeli children who are not even experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, but just simply stress disorder, because it's not going away. So a lot of tough talk about the fact that the kids in the Gaza area living in southern Israel will be able to sleep at night. That has not been the case, and it's not changing anytime soon. We've learned many, many times that Hamas agrees to these deals and then keeps on firing. Again, we're going to get to Maurice Hirsch in his article, "It's Time to Kill Terrorists," in just a few minutes, and maybe think about a different policy after hearing what that article is all about. At the same time, even though there is this so-called ceasefire in the works, Khaled Abu Tuameh reports at the J-Post that these weekly protests along the Gaza-Israel border will continue despite the ceasefire. So it's called a ceasefire, yet they carry out these violent protests with attempts to infiltrate into Israel and murder the first Jew they see. So how is that a ceasefire? How is that acceptable? How is Israel accepting a reality in which these weekly attempted murder demonstrations continue? I'm not understanding it. The demands, which apparently Israel has accepted, Hamas demands, include the expansion of the fishing zone, the reopening of the border crossings, delivery of additional Qatari funds to Gaza, and more job opportunities. So we're agreeing to their demands, and yet we're still getting these rockets. We're still getting weekly violent demonstrations on the border. Speaking of opening of the crossings, Israel National News reported that just yesterday, the crossings were already open. The Kerem Shalom crossing and the Erez crossing yesterday on Sunday reopened after they were closed following last week's rocket attack on central Israel. So we're allowing humanitarian aid and all these goods into Gaza at the same time that they're firing rockets and continuing to try to infiltrate into our communities. I don't understand. This is, in my opinion, enabling Hamas to continue along their path, even though you can claim it's humanitarian aid, either Hamas steals it from their own people or tries to smuggle in other goods and materials into Gaza, namely rocket making materials, building materials. They've been caught dozens of times sneaking things in, and the material that that Hamas does distribute to their people, in the people of Gaza, in their minds, this just shows to them that Hamas is providing for them, and they should stop feeling that. And we had demonstrations by residents of Gaza over the last couple of weeks, which, by the way, Hamas then opened fire on their residents. We need to get the people there to continue those demonstrations and understand the fact that Hamas just brings them gloom or doom. Many do understand that. But by sending them more materials, by opening these crossings, this, in my opinion, just enables Hamas further and actually does the opposite of, has the opposite effect on what the protesters are trying to do. So I don't understand, as our residents are running for the shelters, why we are once again opening those border crossings. Naftali Bennett, our Minister of Education, who's running in the next election with the New Right Party, says we need to crack down on Hamas. Quoted here by the J-Post, "Those who think that surrender will buy us calm are mistaken. Every surrender to terrorism only whets the appetite for more terror." I agree with him. Bennett said, adding that we now anticipate an additional wave of terror, which will be much more violent. That's Naftali Bennett criticizing the policy of entering yet another ceasefire with Hamas, while at the same time, Hamas says that they're getting ready to bomb Tel Aviv. Arutz Israel National News says, again, quotes one of the heads of Hamas, Sinwar, saying our Palestinian, this is them talking, not me, people say en masse that they want to live in dignity, want to live, and they say, oh, beloved ones, bomb Tel Aviv. So they're threatening to bomb Tel Aviv, they're still launching rockets, and they claim, oh, it's not us, it's Islamic Jihad. But everyone who fires a rocket, it's under the rule of Hamas in Gaza. Hamas is ultimately responsible. So I don't get it. I don't get it, folks. And Maurice Hirsch in a few minutes will enlighten us a little bit more. At the same time, Naftali Bennett complaining to the Attorney General of Israel, Mandelblit, that the Prime Minister is isolating cabinet ministers from the situation, not updating the cabinet, not convening the cabinet, the security cabinet, that is, in regard to Gaza, making decisions with the head of the army and other security people, but not bringing in the other leaders, part of that cabinet, to make the decisions. So the Jewish press talks about Bennett complaining, saying that the Prime Minister is in the wrong here by not bringing these issues and policy decisions to the full security cabinet. But according to one German journalist, everything is hunky-dory here on Israel's southern border, and Israelis just need to get used to the Hamas rocket fire. Just get used to it. This also reported by the J-Post. A controversial left-wing German journalist is under fire for writing a commentary last week declaring that Israelis on the border of the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip can, quote, come to terms with jihadi rocket attacks in their communities. So she says that just let it happen. It's okay. Just get used to it, like any other country would get used to rocket fire targeting their border communities. It's unbelievable that that people even print this and express this and are actually supported in some circles. Israel's embassy slamming journalist Suzanne, I think it's Knaul, 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 for saying that, just get used to it. It's okay. Not a big deal, rockets. Tell that to the thousands of children who are in therapy down in the south who fear for their lives, having 15 seconds or less running to the shelters. Just get used to it. Thank you for your opinions, Suzanne, but maybe just keep them to yourselves, really. Keep your opinions to yourself, because we don't want to hear your nonsense that Israel should just have to get used to rocket fire. That is not acceptable. Before we go to Maurice Hirsch, just some good news here before we end this segment. A 2,600-year-old seal bearing the inscription, quote, belonging to Natan Melech, servant of the king, discovered at the city of David. It was announced yesterday. It's not possible to determine with complete certainty that Natan Melech, who's mentioned in the Bible, is the owner of the stamp, but it's impossible to ignore some of the details that link them together. This according to Dr. Anat Mendel Gerbovitz of Hebrew University, who is part of the team that found this ancient seal. And this is amazing news. And our good friend Doron Spielman from the city of David was quoted here saying the discovery of a public building where this stamp was found on the western slope of the city of David provides a lot of information about the city's structure during this period and the size of its administrative area. Sorry, that's not Doron. That's actually the team who found this stamp in this public building in which it was discovered. Spielman, though, who is actually the vice president of the Ir David Foundation, City of David, he said that this is an extremely exciting find for billions of people worldwide. The ongoing archaeological excavations at the City of David continue to prove that ancient Jerusalem was no longer just a matter of faith, but also a matter of fact. In other words, we were here. We were here long before the modern era. We were here 2,000 years ago and 3,000 years ago. The Jews have been here for a very, very long time, despite all the haters out there and the BDSers and the terrorists and the revisionist thinkers on the liars, I should say, on the Palestinian Authority side and Hamas, who claim there wasn't a temple in Jerusalem and that we have no history to Judea and Samaria and in Jerusalem. So all those haters continue to ramble their lies and nonsense while we continue to find more and more evidence indicating that this was the heartland of the Jewish people for thousands of years, not only in modern times. So wonderful job, Doron Spielman and everyone over there at City of David for this latest discovery, this 2,600-year-old seal discovered in the City of David. We're going to take a short break, come right back with Maurice Hirsch from Palestinian Media Watch. You're listening to Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. My name is Josh Haston. It is the first day of April, 2019. Time is flying. Passover right around the corner. Pretty unbelievable since it's pouring rain here in Israel today. That is usually not the case, but spring is, or it should be, in the air, and it will be sunny for the rest of the week from what I understand. Getting ready for Passover. We're going to take a short break. Be right back here on Israel Uncensored, Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. Don't go anywhere.
Tune in to Inside Israel Today here on the Land of Israel Network, where we have been introducing the world to the candidates running for Knesset. From the Meretz party on the far left to the Otzma Yehudit party on the right. From the Likud to the Blue and White party. From the Labor Party to the Zehut party. We at Inside Israel Today have been interviewing politicians from across the political spectrum who are running in the April 9th election. Tune in to Inside Israel Today on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com.
And we are back. Josh Haston here. Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. It is Monday, the 1st of April, 2019, 25th of Adar Bet, 5779. Speaking to you from a very rainy Gush Etzion, Israel. It's unbelievable. the rain that we've had this year. We've had a drought over the last 5 years, and I think we're headed in the right direction, but it usually does not rain till April here in Israel, but it is definitely a blessing. Anyway, I have a very special guest here on the show. He's been on the program before, an excellent resource to explain the situation here in Israel. A colonel in the reserves, Maurice Hirsch, former director of the military prosecution in Judea and Samaria, currently the head of legal strategies for a very important organization, Palestinian Media Watch, reporting everything that is said in Arabic within the Palestinian Authority, Hamas. You know, all the terror and incitement and hatred towards Israel and the Jewish state. They translate it into English so you can see it firsthand. Maurice, thanks very much for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me again, Josh.
So I want to speak to you about an article that you penned in the Midah online magazine, which is a leading conservative online site. And you can check it out. They have both an English version and a Hebrew version. The title of the article is "It's Time to Kill Terrorists," and I believe you're writing this in response to a rocket which was launched from Gaza last week, which traveled 120 kilometers and smashed into a home in the center of the country. Israel basically on Friday, just several days ago, it looked like to be on the brink of war, perhaps with tanks and units moving down to the south, yet that didn't happen. But you write here that Israel's response to what's going on vis-a-vis Hamas reflects a sad and worrying reality. You say Israel's leaders, together with the IDF, have lost the desire to defend Israel's sovereignty and defeat its enemies. Tell me, if you can, expand on that thought.
So the idea behind the article, Josh, is relatively simple. We have been under attack from Hamas, from Gaza, for the last 15, 17 years. It's intensified over the last 12 years since Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip in 2007, and it's a constant rain of rockets that has been fired. We've had some 15,000 rockets fired from Gaza into Israel. That's not something which any sovereign country should tolerate. Even one missile fired into a sovereign country should be seen as a reason to go to war. We've had a few, I won't say wars, but large-scale military activity in the last 10 years, 4 of those, but nothing more than that. And now we have missiles being fired at Israel, at the heart of Israel's civilian population, and the response of the Israeli government was to destroy a few buildings. As I wrote in the article, buildings can be rebuilt, but dead terrorists can't come back to life, which is why I said that it's time to kill terrorists. Without terrorists, you don't have terrorism.
So why do you think this is the policy? You mentioned we've had, 15,000 rockets? This situation's been going on since 2001. People may not realize Hamas and the terror gangs in Gaza started firing on the Jewish communities of Gush Katif, and then once, of course, we had the expulsion from Gaza of all Jewish life, then they increased their rocket attacks by 500%. What are we waiting for? I know this week we have elections coming up just right around the corner, and there are political considerations, but what has been the thought process, what's going through the minds of the Israeli leaders over the last decade and a half plus in terms of allowing Hamas to continue to control the lives of the people in Gaza and at the same time carry out that double war crime, hiding behind their own civilians and firing onto our women and children and men here in Israel?
So I think part of the explanation that's been given over the last few days is that it's ostensibly good for Israel that there's Hamas in the Gaza Strip, as opposed to the Fatah and the Palestinian Authority in Yehuda Shomron. To divide and conquer is the idea, that whilst they can never be unified within and of themselves, then we can avoid any type of chance that they will be able to unify against us, both of those sides together. That argument, unfortunately, just holds no water. If you don't kill the terrorists, then they will keep on fighting us. To understand the animosity between Hamas and Fatah is key to understanding this problem. We don't need to maintain the Hamas in Gaza. We should kill the Hamas in Gaza because they are terrorists. The Hamas and Fatah hate each other so much, almost to the point where they hate us, where they hate us less than they hate each other. they will continue hating each other. And therefore, if we kill the terrorists, that isn't going to change any of the game. It won't bring them together. It won't unify Gaza and Judea and Samaria.
Nevertheless, in the last operation, I guess, it's an ongoing operation. Last week, Israel hit, you mentioned empty buildings, the office of the head of Hamas's political bureau, Ismail Haniyeh, targeted, destroyed his office, but nevertheless, Israel dropped these warning bombs in advance, these knocks, as they call them, knocks on the roof. In other words, they allowed those who were in the building, even if there were terrorists in the building, they knew that a further attack was coming. They knew the building would be destroyed. And so even though the civilians were able to get out of the building, the leaders, the terrorists, were still able to get out of the buildings. Listen, I know the IDF is the most moral army in the world, but to me a policy like this seems immoral. It seems immoral to allow the terrorists to know that it's time to go underground because of these knock bombs, or whatever they're called, knock bombs.
It's a crazy situation where we actually warn the terrorists before we attack them, because the terrorists surround themselves with civilians. The idea is to avoid civilian casualties, but when the terrorists themselves use the civilian population, and they don't force them to be their own human shields, the civilian population in part are happy to be the human shields for the terrorists. They are no less culpable than the terrorists themselves, and they could be no less targeted. That is the problem with that warning system, and it's been taken, unfortunately, to such a degree that we're incapable of actually killing terrorists anymore.
So is this a problem from the brass of the IDF, those who are leading the army, or is this from the top political echelons? Where does the problem start? Is it the Prime Minister of the State of Israel? Is it his security cabinet? I know we have Minister Naftali Bennett saying that we really need to crack down against Hamas. Who is giving the advice, to keep Hamas in power because of what you were talking about before, in order to maintain that rift between the PA and Hamas? Who's ultimately advising to keep Hamas sitting there in Gaza?
I think it's a combination of both the political echelon and the military echelon. That from the politician side, there's no clear directive to the army to go and win. What does that mean, to win? It means to get rid of the terrorists. It doesn't necessarily mean to take control of the Gaza Strip. We don't necessarily need soldiers, boots on the ground in the Gaza Strip. We have a tremendous air force which could bomb any one of these sites and kill as many terrorists as possible. From the army's side, I think there is a lot of hesitation. We've seen also in my regular work with Palestinian Media Watch, the interference of some of the parts of the army against the fight against terrorism, actively trying to undermine steps that are taken. The army is a very, very substantial player, and the army appears also to have lost that desire to win, even in the absence of a perfectly clear directive from the political echelon.
So who can create a policy change? We have elections coming up 2 weeks from, a week from tomorrow. Wow, it's right around the corner. Is there a candidate, and I'm not asking you who you're voting for, but is there a candidate out there who you would trust in order to change this policy to really go after the terrorists? Minister Naftali Bennett has notched up his rhetoric, if you will, over the last couple of days, saying if he were defense minister, he would destroy Hamas. Then again, we heard Avigdor Lieberman, our last defense minister, claim before the previous election, if he was put in that position within 48 hours, he would take out the heads of Hamas. He never did that. Are you confident that there is a leader out there who would reverse this, I think, insane policy to allow the residents of the South to continue to suffer? You're talking about we're already moving into the second generation of children who've been suffering as a result of these attacks. Is there anybody out there who can make real change?
Unfortunately, I haven't heard anyone as part of the election campaign provide any clear pattern or program in order to combat the Hamas. That's something which I haven't heard. Even Minister Bennett's program doesn't really get to the details of what needs to be done. It cannot be limited to, whilst I write in the article that it's time to kill terrorists, it cannot be limited to periods of time where there's a confrontation. It has to be a systematic program that's run throughout the year, throughout the period of the government, to ensure that the Hamas understands that Israel has a real deterrent and that it's just not worth it for them to ever fire rockets.
What can we see now, assuming that immediately you said you don't see anybody out there who's willing to take that step? What can we expect? I mean, we had a rocket fired yesterday. We had 5 rockets fired 2 days before. The confrontations on the border may continue this Friday. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I mean, what can we expect here in the near future? Just more of the same, or will there be any type of shift? We're talking about also a long-term ceasefire. I don't know. I think this is like the 57th ceasefire. I can't even keep track. That Israel apparently, who doesn't negotiate with Hamas, does so via Egypt and other partners. I mean, is there going to be any change in the near future, or are we just going to continue to see what I call a cycle of stupidity, where Hamas attacks us, we attack them, blow up empty buildings, as you say, and just carry on?
I don't think that we're really going to see any major change, unfortunately. Every ceasefire that we do manage to broker, however it is achieved, has always been broken by the Hamas, because the Hamas is a terrorist organization. They don't care about these deals. And unfortunately, what is proven true every time for Hamas, and we've seen it again this time, they fired a rocket at the heart of Israel's civilian population, and they've just received a prize, extending the fishing area off the Gaza Strip by another 5 nautical miles, 27 kilometers they can go. That is as a result of firing a rocket. Every time we make the same mistake by providing terrorism with a prize. And so I can't see anything changing.
And yesterday, I mentioned earlier in the show that Hamas was allowed to, or rather Israel decided they were going to open the border crossings once again, continue to provide humanitarian aid. We're talking about just a day after 5 rockets were launched, and on the same day as another rocket was launched while we were on the brink of war just 3 days ago, yet Israel ordered open the border crossings. I'm not exactly sure I understand that policy as well, but I just wanted to maybe finish on a positive note, something that your organization is doing, Palestinian Media Watch. Maybe you can share something you guys are working on, or how you've exposed the true face of what's being said on the other side, perhaps that has influenced or will soon influence any policymakers in the near future, based on the work that you're doing with Palestinian Media Watch. Anything, any scoop or anything that you're working on right now that you can possibly share in terms of exposing what Hamas truly is, and the other terror organizations, whether it's Fatah or the rest, who are operating out of the Palestinian Authority or Gaza?
So at the moment, what we're trying to promote and really develop is an idea which combats some of the attack on Israel. Israel is being constantly criticized for injuring in some way Palestinian minors, whether it be through the legal process, whether it be the children that are being shot at the demonstrations, or wherever they are. We saw that coming up in the recent Board of Inquiry for the UN. And what we're now working on is and we released the first report on this subject, the idea that it's all very nice to come and blame Israel for Palestinian children being injured at the end of the line, but really what everyone, the international community, is ignoring is that the Palestinians themselves, whether it be Fatah, the PA, Hamas, are actively recruiting the Palestinian children to be terrorists. And that's something which the world at this stage seems to be ignoring. All of the so-called human rights organizations that simply don't write about it, that simply don't document it. I had a meeting a while ago with the head of UNICEF in Israel. We showed her documentation of Palestinian incitement of children, a guide to throwing rocks for children. And said, well, we don't deal with that.
Right. They're too busy dealing with Jews building pergolas in Judea and Samaria. It's a crazy situation. But we're out of time here, unfortunately. But I want people to be able to get access to the article. It's called "It's Time to Kill Terrorists," Colonel Maurice Hirsch. Go to mida.org.il. and check out the article, It's Time to Kill Terrorists? And also, how can people get in touch with you and find out more or access Palestinian Media Watch to see the important work you're doing there?
You could actually go just straight to our site, PalWatch, PalWatch, PalWatch. That's our website. That's where all of the information that you really need to understand what's going on with the Palestinians. It's there. It's current. It's every day. It's updated every day. Really, with our main bulletin of the day, but also other items that are uploaded.
Colonel in the Reserves Maurice Hirsch, Head of Legal Strategies for Palestinian Media Watch, former Director of the Military Prosecution in Judea and Samaria. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. And let's hope for a change in policy. Let's hear some good news here coming up in the near future. Who knows, maybe after the elections we'll be surprised, shocked to find a leader in a position of power who can create these important changes in order to deter and to prevent the next terror attack. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Josh.
That is a wrap for the show today. My name is Josh Haston. This is Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. For the 1st of April, it is Monday, 2019, April 1st, 25th of Adar Bet 5779. Coming to you from a very wet and rainy and blessed, is that how you say it? Gush Etzion. It is great to see the rain here. And the Kinneret, the Lake of Galilee, rising, and all the wonderful things happening as we get ready for the holiday of Passover. It's unbelievable to actually think about the fact that Passover is right around the corner when it's still pouring rain here, but nevertheless, just about 2.5 weeks away. Get in touch with me during the week, Josh at thelandofisrael.com. On Facebook, it is Joshua Haston, or check out my new page, Josh Haston, Israel Advocacy and Journalism, on Twitter at Josh Haston, and now on Instagram as well. If you missed any part of the show, you can go back and listen to it on demand on Facebook, SoundCloud, landofisrael.com website, or anywhere else that you can find it. A big shout out to Benjamin Bresky for all the work he does in getting these shows up, and Tabitha Epstein for everything she does for the station behind the scenes. That's a wrap from Gush Etzion. Most importantly, between now and when we speak again, please God, next Monday, everybody out there in the wonderful world of ours, be safe. Shalom, shalom from Gush Etzion, Israel.